In today's discussion, we'll talk about why most weight loss programs don't work. Our special guest today is Dr. George Moricz.
Oh, thank you for having me, Chip. Thank you for having me on your show tonight.
Dr. Moricz, I was watching the news recently and learned that almost 68% of adult Americans are considered overweight. Medically speaking, what are the key reasons for this?
Well, that is a very alarming number. You know, when we look back years ago, we can estimate that actually people ate 300 to 400 calories less in their day. There's also something that was done in the medical community which contributed to this problem. We actually thought that it would be healthier for people to have a low-fat diet. So what we did is we decreased the percentage of fat in the diet and increased it with carbohydrates, or better known as sugar. And so we created our own problem. Other factors, of course, everybody has certain genetic tendencies. We think there's over 400 genes which may predispose people to having a condition of obesity or having too much fat in their body. What we do know, of course, is that more than likely there's a number of genes which predispose you to it. There are a few syndromes and rare defects in the genes which make people completely 100% you're going to get obese in life, but more often than not, there is some genetic predisposition. Lifestyle, that is a huge factor. If you just look at the type of activities that we do or do not engage in, the drive-through eating, the type of foods, it's just so alarming.
And of course, the purpose for you being here is to inform us about all this kind of stuff and turn our thought process around. But what about these commercial programs like Jenny Craig and things of that nature?
Well, that's a superb question. I think what we're talking about is commercialized weight loss programs. And what most of the people that come to see me, a lot of them have already tried these programs. And so they end up in the office and they've really spent quite a bit of money and expectations. Medically speaking, these are what we call restricted calorie isocaloric diets. In other words, they fix their calories. And in medicine, we define a low-calorie diet as something between 800 and 1,200 calories. Now, a very low-calorie diet, a VLCD, which doctors such as myself who specialize in weight management programs, we can do that safely through medical supervision. But when you're talking about a commercialized program, 800 to 1,200 calories, people are asked to follow a certain regimen of foods. The problem is when you look at true studies that look at weight loss and maintaining weight loss over a year or two, these programs really don't hold up. So while I don't discourage someone from trying certain meals and participating in these programs, the big deficiency is the programs don't increase your metabolism. In other words, all the sum of chemical processes, the energy production in your body, it does not increase your metabolism. So in the long run, you really don't have long-standing weight loss. On the other hand, you might actually do something that hurts you in the long run. If you think about it, you restrict your calories, well, your body's pretty smart. When we were cave people, just imagine, thousands of years ago, we had restricted food. We couldn't eat every day. And so what would happen is in times of starvation, our thermoregulatory process in our body, we would shut down. Think of your thyroid, the little gland in your neck. Well, that would basically turn down. And so just like a thermostat, it would try to protect you from metabolizing too much. So people go into these programs, they actually tune down their metabolism. Well, what happens as far as their body composition? Body composition is not just your weight. We're looking at fat and muscle ratios. Well, a lot of patients on these programs will actually lose muscle, which is tragic, and I'll explain that in a minute. So they may drop overall weight, and they may lose a little fat, but they drop muscle. So what happens later is that they cannot metabolize more. If we both go work out and eat a very controlled diet and build muscle, what happens, even while we're sleeping, we're burning more calories. That leads me to something else, is metabolism. What is it? Well, to understand metabolism, the sum of all these energy processes, there's three components. If you and I are sitting here and we're not even talking very much and just sitting here, it takes about 50 to 60% of our metabolism just to do that. Another 10+% is what's called thermic effect. In other words, just by eating food, you actually do consume some calories. So where does that leave us? Well, there's another third of our metabolism that's related to activity or exercise. And just to keep it simple, let's assume that it's just energy expenditure of moving around, whether it's exercise or activities of daily living. So if you don't increase that, but you're restricting your calories, well, you're not building muscle. And in the long run, you actually will have less ability to metabolize. So that's why people rebound and they show up in the office really upset.
So, Dr. Moricz, what you're saying is most people don't want to work to achieve weight loss or to maintain a weight loss. They just want a quick fix. And with that in mind, wouldn't surgery just be a quick fix as well?
Well, there is a lot of bias in our society. Patients who are heavy, who are basically fat, and there's nothing wrong with saying it. In medicine, we use the term obese, but let's be honest, I've never had a patient who truly had a weight problem come and say, well, I feel obese. No, they feel fat, and there is a lot of fat on their body. So there is a lot of discrimination toward that. Number two, society tends to punish you if you're heavy because, number one, it's been shown that people don't get the same jobs. They get the cold shoulder. Socially, they have a harder time around people because there is a bias toward it, and we have this bias in our society that if you're heavy, if you have too much fat on your body, that you actually did something wrong, or you just did not exercise eating restraint. The further we look into metabolism and genetics and our lifestyle is that it's a lot more complicated. There's an interaction of chemicals and hormones in the gut and the brain, and there's basically regulators like leptin and insulin. You hear about these chemicals, and they, along with other hormones and gut peptides, basically proteins and signalers in the gut that actually control your satiety mechanisms and your feeding. So it's really complicated when society says, well, you should just eat less and exercise more. I find that that's why people fail. Though that turns us to the next thing. So you've gone out and you've done all the commercialized programs, you've spent all this money, and you haven't done really well. Well, the no-brainer was saying, well, let's just get a quick fix or surgery. And, I really don't blame people for that because, let's be honest, if something's not working, if your car is having lots of problems and you say, well, just get a new car, well, that's surgery. Here's the real interesting point, because patients who have to go for what's called bariatric surgery for weight loss, and a lot of times you hear about banding procedures, gastroplasties, sleeves. Basically, you're finding ways of constricting the stomach or bypassing the usual route of food. When you do that surgery, well, what happens is that the patients are required in many cases to drop a lot of weight because they have a fatty liver, and the surgeon can't even get into the belly because the patients have such large mass. So they actually, a lot of times, will go on a liquid diet, lose weight to have surgery. Well, then they have surgery, then they put them in medical weight management, which is what we're here talking about anyway. In other words, the very thing that patients are almost sold that they would avoid ends up actually helping in maintaining them. So there are studies that actually show that if people are greater than 50 or 60% fat in their body, then yes, bariatric surgery is very, very appropriate for some of those patients. And that's where we actually were able to extrapolate or basically take information and draw out the fact that they're dropping the risk of coronary disease, diabetes, and multiple other problems, even cancer, for instance, fat and cancer. So patient goes through surgery, they come back, and then they get into medical weight management. And that's where I see a lot of patients. They've had the lab band procedure, and, they gain back a third, half, or some of them are right almost back to where they started. So then they seek me out or another doctor who's interested in weight management. They say, well, doctor, what do we do now?
Well, Dr. Moricz, what do we do now? What does your program consist of, and what's it all about?
Well, a few years ago, I had the benefit. One of my patients kind of came up to me and said, look, you help me with all these other problems that I have, and you've done surgery on me for other related things, but would you do me one favor? And I said, well, sure, let me see if I can help you. She said, well, would you figure out how to jumpstart the metabolism that I'm missing and how just help me lose weight, but do it in a way that's safe and effective? Well, that got me thinking, and I got interested in this quest to figure out why is it that everywhere you go, there's a pill clinic, get Adipex, lose weight now, lose fat, get a lab band surgery, yet really, what does the public really understand? What have they been told about how weight management works? Well, I started going back in our traditional training as doctors. Years ago, not a lot was written about it. Now, with the increasing epidemic of obesity and overweight patients, as you mentioned earlier, we're actually spending a lot more effort on this real dilemma. So what I looked at initially as a hormonal specialist, I started looking at sleep because my patients for years have been complaining about their sleep. And yes, there's a way to work up sleep and there's a way to help them with sleep. But I noticed the correlation of patients who weren't sleeping were having weight trouble. So I started to realize, I said, well, this is due to an abnormal lack of surge of growth hormone and too much cortisol through the night. And in other words, people who work night shifts, they have awful time losing weight, and those are the harder patients to help. Now, I've helped a number of them, but you have to work a little harder with them and really educate them. So started looking at that connection. Then I started studying all the other hormones that basically nosedive as you get older. And a lot of them are related, once again, to slowing metabolism. Now, we can never separate aging from hormonal change because a lot of times they happen at the same time, and you can never really blame one hormone entirely. But what we're seeing is in some enzymes, something called lipoprotein lipase, there's an imbalance of basically male-female hormone and cortisol and progesterone. So what happens is that you're more predisposed to gaining weight. So while we don't have the exact answer, we're seeing some tendencies. So then I started sitting and I said, well, I have some theories about how I can help patients. So I did a test, and over the last 2 years, I've had hundreds of patients who I educated them, I showed them what we were going to do, and I met with them weekly. So I developed a weekly all-inclusive program. And to make myself, reach the high bar, what I did is I did body composition on these patients. So I did it at week 1 and week 8. And what I was able to demonstrate for those who participated, were compliant on a weekly basis, and I saw them, I gave them their shots, and I have a huge program in how I do this. What I noticed was they were dropping the fat and they were maintaining the muscle, and in some cases increasing muscle. And over the long run, those that needed more drastic weight loss, I noticed that they kept it up. And so certainly I use things like herbals, I use hormones, and I use weight loss aids. But what I found was that when patients stuck with the weekly programs, we gave them their lipotropic shots that flush fat and cholesterol, and went with the recommended diet of their choice, because I had different choices, they did really well.
What percentage of your patients would you say lost weight and maintained a weight loss with your program?
Well, we've had a very positive response. I would say 70 to 80% of the patients who stayed with our program through 8 weeks saw a significant loss. I had some other patients who were not so far as obese, but they were more overweight. They had less weight loss, but their body composition improved. So imagine this. Imagine you're 15, 20, 30 pounds from your goal. Well, what I noticed was that they dropped weight, but when I actually broke down the weight they lost, they actually gained some muscle. So a lot of times it wasn't as significant, but their whole body contour. You look at patients and they come in and say, I want to weigh such and such. Well, that's really nice. I mean, I give them this example. If you were to take Arnold Schwarzenegger, who everybody knows, and you put him on a scale, he weighs too much. If you put him on one of those insurance charts, which have weight and height and surface area, he's way off the chart. Guy can't get insurance. But then you do a body composition on him and you measure fat and muscle, you notice that he's very lean, doesn't have a lot of fat, and he's lots of muscle. And so there's a different shift, from not just looking at weight, but looking at body composition. But when people look in the mirror, what happens is they notice that they've really slimmed up, they've lost the gut. In women, the thighs and the buttock area and the belly, and men, especially the belly, they really drop. So we've had a very high success rate for those patients who were willing to put their skin in it. And that's why I do this, is because I get the gratitude and the satisfaction that they actually do lose the weight.
So if I decided to make a lifestyle change and lose a little weight and decide to keep it off, what could I expect on my first appointment when I came to see you?
Well, once again, this is a very critical point that you bring up. Number one, when you're looking at a doctor to help you with your weight management goals, you really need someone who's interested in your care. And usually the first thing I would really emphasize to patients is someone who takes the time to figure out your motivations. In other words, what's the reason? Is it aesthetic, looking good, feeling good? Is it medical? Are you having trouble with diabetes, heart attack, or just have a bad family history and you're really worried about it? You want to be around for family family and children. So you want to look at the motivations. Secondly, you want to look at what kind of things they've tried. What is their lifestyle? What are they likely to succeed with? I particularly look at a food diary and see what kind of foods they've been eating, the frequency of their foods. I try to figure out if they would do better with a specialized diet, or do they want a lot of flexibility. See, to me, it doesn't matter. When I developed my program, I figured out a way that I could help them all along the way. And then, of course, we make some choices about how you do it. Hormonally, do we use herbals? Do we use weight loss medicines that are FDA approved? Then, of course, I add another layer on there. I use lipotropics. Lipotropics basically flush fat and cholesterol out. If you take cholesterol and fat and you make it mushy and basically water soluble, it basically can be flushed out of your liver. And this is a mechanism that some doctors use just by itself all over the country to help people drop weight. So we look at the myriad of options. We try to feel where would the patient succeed the most, because it really doesn't matter what I want. It's looking at what they would succeed with. And then what we do is we create a step-by-step plan. We see them weekly. I require everyone to come in weekly. If someone is not serious enough to come in weekly, I will honestly tell them, saying that they're not in this. They're not in this, and then I can't be in it, and guess what? We fail. And I don't like failure. The worst thing you can do to a patient is reinforce failure. And people have come to me, they failed the commercial programs, they've done all kinds of stuff, they've gone to the store, they've bought this on the internet, failure, and so you're miserable. You take anybody and you reinforce failure. So what we try to do is we try to unwind that and show them how they can succeed.
Well, Dr. Moricz, a question that I've wondered throughout this conversation is, if I had been unhealthy most of my life, had a lot of health problems throughout my life, am I still a candidate for one of your programs?
Even more, and I tell you that it's unfortunate that if someone got to the point in their health where they sought me out just for that, but I will tell you that's where I make the biggest difference. When we do our big studies and we look at what's called body mass index, kind of the weight to surface area, what we're finding is that the further you drop the body mass index, in other words, when you get under a 30 is considered obese. When you get under 30, you dramatically drop your risk of death, you drop your level of diabetes, risk of coronaries. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So actually, it's never too late to get started. Even modest reduction in fat makes a huge difference. Somebody came to me and says, well, fat is fat. Well, actually, it's not. Fat is not just a storage of excessive calories. The most active hormonal organ in your body is fat. I know this blows people's minds. You would think, oh, it's got to be my pancreas, my thyroid, my male, female. No, it's fat. Fat is not just storage depot. What it is chemically active, and it cranks out all these inflammatory factors. It cranks out steroids, estrogens. It's even related to the precursor to high blood pressure. In other words, it secretes a chemical that activates your kidneys so that you become hypertensive. You have high blood pressure. And then, of course, we know that the level of fat in your body makes you insulin resistant or pre-diabetic if you're not already diabetic. So by modifying that risk factor, you have dramatically decreased your risk of death. And so I would congratulate someone who would be willing to admit to a strange doctor saying, look, I've got a problem here and I need you to help me because I don't want to die of a heart attack or I don't want to be disabled. That is a remarkable step that a patient can take.
Well, that's exciting. It sounds like a program I might even get into. Let's say I wanted to do that. How would I get in touch with you to set up my appointment?
Well, we've got a wonderful way to access our program. What I'll have you do is call Body Hormone Balance at 903-794-6962. We also have a new website, weightlosstexarkana.com. But when you do call, mention that you heard us through this radio program tonight, and we'll get you into our complimentary offer. You can meet our liaison. We'll do a screening and just get you acquainted, because our goal here is to provide you the tools to succeed, and sometimes just to experience what we do at Body Hormone Balance. I just feel it's important to reach out and offer something complimentary to get you started.
Thank you, Dr. Moricz, for being on our program. Thank you for the insightful information about weight loss and why most weight loss programs don't work. For more information on this subject, contact Dr. George Moricz.